On the other side of a mirror, there's a reflection, where the shadow of a family stands and remembers. Behind the crystal surfaces, generations of the skilled and dedicated stood as tall as the mirrors they've produced, which have hung in Maltese homes for almost a century. Looking back through the glass, it glimmers in those humble beginnings of a man's spirit to achieve and provide. And when we see the men in the mirrors, honour and integrity shines upon those that provided for so many, all of which can tell their story. Our voyage begins in the 18th century when a French ship's pilot set sail for Malta. Jean-Francois Guillaume came from a family of chartered merchantmen in a fishing port in the French province of Marseille. He was a pioneer in his own right, travelling and trading across the sea. His ship's hold were often laden with such valuable cargo as wheat, olive, wine and cotton. He and his crew would regularly sail to the Mediterranean island that was soon to become his new home. Ship's pilots were often the highest on the galley rolls, as the Grand Masters of Malta paid healthy salaries for such skilled men. In 1796, only 2 years before Napoleon's occupation, a Lutheran chaplain on a visit to Malta met with Jean-Francois, who had now made the island his home. They became friends, and from the chaplain's diary we have learned that Jean-Francois married Josephine, who was to sadly pass away in 1799, aged only 46. 2 years later, Francois remarried and had 3 children. Unfortunately, none of them made it into adulthood. However, from his first marriage, his son Vincent had no less than 11 children, and it was his son Isidoro who was to be the great-grandfather to the founder of a Maltese family business that went on to trade across the seas and through the generations. That pioneer was Xavier Guillaume.
My father certainly was a risk taker. To start certain ideas or businesses from scratch with very little financial support was certainly an attribute of a risk taker. I don't think he ever risked anything that he could not afford, but certainly, yes, he was that type of person. Because if you imagine anything that can go wrong when you are starting a business, you'll never start it.
Yet, another new start beckoned for the Guillaume business when they found bigger and better premises at 561 the High Street, Hamroon. What they hadn't reckoned on were the neighbours. When Xavier applied for the permit, Mr. and Mrs. Schwerer voiced their objections due to the noise levels. Local officials were called in. They were to put Xavier's business to the test. Obtaining the permit was critical to the business and to Xavier. The test would take place on the Schwereb's roof, where Mr. Schwereb would only consent to the permit if tests confirmed a decibel level not detrimental to his health and well-being. A police sergeant remained with the bevelers in the factory, and at a given signal, the grinding commenced. The bevelers were only using the fine sand normally utilised at the end of the beveling process. This gave it a much softer and more mellow noise than the normal coarse grain. On hearing it, Mrs. Schwereb exclaimed, "Oh, how nice! It sounds just like the rain." Xavier's factory had passed its test, the permit was granted, and they were back in business.
The way my father managed to achieve certain objectives was through determination, hard work, constancy of purpose, and basically he was, I would say, a very positive thinker.